So this is just one of my favorite pictures in the whole wide world. It says constipation, it brings out the worst in all of us. And so I thought this was an appropriate picture to start our lecture on laxatives. And it's right before lunchtime. And as always, I always seem to be giving this lecture right before lunchtime. I don't know why that is. So laxatives, and we're going to study about 5 different types, aid in the elimination of stool from the rectum. Of course, when we have gotten all the nutrients from the foods we don't need, the body takes what we don't need and turns it into waste and expels it through the passage of feces. And if everything goes well, things are not too fast, not too slow, not too wet, not too dry. But in the event that you have dry stools and slow gastric motility, you can run into problems. And that's where these laxatives come in. And most of the time you'll be able to tell exactly how these laxatives work from the name of them. So we've got bulk forming, we have fecal softeners, we have hyperosmolar or saline solutions that take fluid from one part of the body and pull it into the rectum, or the large intestine, the whole large intestine actually. We have lubricant laxatives, and we have stimulant or irritant laxatives. I want you to make sure you take note of the charming picture on page 255. That'll spoil your appetite. And then go on over to page 259, where we have examples of the different kinds of laxatives. Actually, it starts on 258, the top of 258. Drugs for diarrhea and constipation, and the constipation is found second, so pages 258 and 259. So the first type we're going to talk about are bulk forming laxatives. If you take a bulk forming laxative, and the example given in the book is a plant product called psyllium, and Metamucil is a trade name. And this is found at the top of page 259. They absorb water and they expand. They increase the bulk and moisture of the stool, and that in turn stimulates the GI tract. Peristalsis increases. The absorbed water kind of softens the stool and makes it easy to pass. Psyllium, like I said, is a plant product, and it's one of the things we find in the stem of a plant to absorb water. And so we see this if you've got a plant that you've kind of neglected and it's looking a little droopy. If you water it, it doesn't take very long for the leaves to stand up again and the plant to perk up and stand straight, because the psyllium inside the plant stem has soaked up water and kind of puffed it out and expanded it. And that's what it does inside your colon. So, happy thought. Fecal softeners. And an example of this would be docusate or Colace, which is a real common drug, that little oval football red gel looking drug. It lowers the surface tension. Feces has a mucus coating that helps it travel easily through the GI tract, but it also keeps water from absorbing into it. And so it cuts down on the water tightness of the stool and allows more fluid in the intestine to be absorbed into the fecal mass. So it's not really a laxative per se, but it softens the stool so that it can be regularly passed without a whole lot of difficulty. The powerhouses of the laxatives are hyperosmolar laxatives, mostly saline. These are the medications that you use when you're fixing to have a heavy-duty test or something. And one of them, it isn't really listed here, but that big jug of powder that they call Go Lightly, and I don't know why they call it Go Lightly, because you don't. But it's mostly saline. You mix it with water, you drink it. You're supposed to drink at least a third of that huge jug. Sometimes you can mix it with fruit juice to make it a little less obnoxious. But it does a fantastic job of raising the saline level inside the colon, which attracts more fluid. I'm talking lots of fluid. I'm talking to where like you'll feel thin because all your fluid's going to your colon. And it cleans things out. It cleans it out really well. It draws water into the bowel. It promotes peristalsis and bowel movement. So we use it to prepare the colon before like a colonoscopy or colon procedures. Also, you've heard of barium enemas, where a substance called barium is introduced into the colon, and then x-rays are taken and you can spot different problems in the colon because the barium sort of lights everything up. Trouble is, barium has to be expelled, and if it's not expelled in a timely manner, it gets really hard. And so you can use these hyperosmolar laxatives to soften up that barium and get rid of it. This is good for elderly patients who tend to retain the barium. So if they have a problem getting rid of it after, they can pass it after the testing process. A lubricant laxative. On page 259, we see glycerin suppository. They have one called Sanasup. And usually it's just something to sort of make a barrier between the wall of the colon and the stool itself. And so the water can't reabsorb into the stool. It stays in the colon and gradually softens up that stool. And then finally, the type we're probably most familiar with, stimulant or irritant laxatives, and they do exactly what they say they're going to do. An example of this is bisacodyl or Dulcolax. It actually increases peristalsis. It makes the GI tract move more. So it can stimulate the nerves of the colon or of the mucous membranes, or it can work directly on the muscles themselves. So there'll be increased movement, and that's going to rush that stool along. It's not going to absorb as much water. So you usually will end up passing stool along with some of the water.